Our Brain and the Evolution. We have written several articles related to how the human being functions, astrology, and the evolution of consciousness. Over time, one became interested in the subject, since a curious mind wants to find out how things work. Several authors have written about scientific research related to how the brain functions, such as David L. Weiner, Joel Gayer, Jeffrey Schwartz, M.D., Rebecca Gladding, M.D., Carl H. Pribram, M.D., Stanislav Grof, M.D., just to mention a few. Other authors who give a more spiritual approach to personal development, such as the Franciscan Richard Rohr, or the shaman Don Miguel Ruiz, among others. All research as well as spiritual guidance aim to the development of consciousness. For someone like myself coming from the computer field, with a successful career of more than 30 years, always keeping in parallel a research in astrology makes it easy to connect current knowledge of the functioning of the brain with astrology concepts. Although astrology is not currently considered as a branch of psychology by science, there is all the evidence that it should be included. Every time a new development in science emerged, it is confronted by the establishment, for breaking with the status quo, and the interests of those who are already entrenched in their professional careers. Psychoanalysis was challenged in its beginnings, and in its path of acceptance, Carl Jung was left aside, for his open approach and techniques which also included astrology. In this regard, Sigmund Freud disagreed with Jung, and by consensus, Freud's theories were taken as the only truth. This marginalization is not a coincidence, since the Catholic Church had sentenced astrology in the 16th century. One of the most famous works condemning astrology was Pico della Miranda's Disputations against Adivinatory Astrology, published in 1496, which detailed problems with astrological theory and technique and condemned the denial of free will that Miranda saw in astrological practice. In 1586, Pope Sixtus V issued a papal bull condemning magic and all forms of divination, including horary, electoral, and natal astrology. That is, it included astrology with other divination methods, when astrology is governed by astronomical concepts and mathematical calculations, and aims to measure the active energies in the person and the environment based on movement of the solar system. In reality, we cannot judge the Pope or his followers for these determinations, since they were taken from mere ignorance of how things work. At that time, there was neither NASA nor the European Space Agency that could explain them that each planet in the solar system has a particular vibration and sound, and they put out energy that influence us, that the hormonal cycle of women is governed by the cycles of the moon, just as the gestation process, and so on. Every rule was based on a doctrine that was taught and enforced vertically, depending on the enlightened on duty who was occupying the throne of St. Peter. The Gregorian calendar, the one we use to this day, was decided by Pope Gregory XIII after several consultations, modifying the starting of the year from the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, to January 1st. Although this calendar is not exact as compared to the previous one, since it has a time deviation with the orbit of the Earth, it is still been used today. This brief review just to point out how our today's life has been influenced by determinations taken centuries ago. As we can see, the Catholic Church had complete authority over what was and was not, and ruled lives of millions on the Western Hemisphere, and in many cases we continue to live under these erroneous standards or concepts. If we refer to astrology, science continued with what was established by the Church long time ago, considering it a method of divination, with which it continues to be linked to witchcraft and Satanism, beyond the fact that scientific analyses were never made to endorse or refute its concepts. The science today became the church of yesterday, they judge and sentence as the only truth. The question we must ask ourselves is, if we are so advanced in science, how is it that until now there has not been a cure for cancer, AIDS, the prevention of a heart attack, or an aneurysm, Not to mention the current virus, where science goes back and forth with the remedies to be applied, with little success. If we look at the trend of the pandemic, we follow the same pattern of the Spanish flu of 1918, where science was just beginning to have weight in our lives. The parallelism is incredible. Where is the answer of science there? On the blog, there is an astrological analysis with a comparison that proves it. The point is not to question science per se, but if we accepted it without any question, it becomes another religion, where there is a lot of good things in it, mixed with erroneous concepts. Just consider how science has helped in humans' personal development. Science has not improved the living conditions for billions of people on the planet. Moreover, some social conditions have worsened. We are not only referring to the basic things such as food, housing, education and health, but to people's mental state. We have advanced in the knowledge on how the brain works, but science seems to only be in charge of discovering things. Very little effort is put into prevention. They are always trying to catch up with a given situation and trying to find a remedy of a condition. You can fix a glass after broken, but it will never be the same as before. The functioning of our brain is as fragile as glass. All our effort as people and as an organized society, which includes science, should be aimed at developing habits and customs in our children that aim to improve the quality of life, both of them and in their environment. We talk about improving the environment, but it seems that we do not understand what environment means. Everyone expects the other to do something, but to change something, you have to start with yourself. If we could understand what or where is the problem, we could work on changing bad habits, and more importantly, we would teach that to those who follow us. The future, the children that are growing up, which are learning what life is, what society is, what the world is. Our brain has components that interact 24 hours a day, whether we are aware of it or not. The different components include the characteristics of our DNA, but not only by this. If it was just DNA, then it would be very easy to determine a person's behavior pattern. Apart from DNA, we must consider what a mother transmits to the baby in the womb during the gestation period, her emotional and physical states, as well as events that occur in her environment, and the experiences and education of the baby after birth. From the moment of birth, astrology determines the basic characteristics of the newborn, and from that moment on it is possible to know what their evolutionary main points and cycles will be. Astrology has well defined the different stages of evolution of the person, represented by the intervening planets. Each planet has a different vibration, and depending on the aspect you make with a natal chart, this is how the energies will be activated. We are not predicting the future, we are simply saying what conditions will exist. We are the ones who determines what to do or not to do at all times. It could be compared with the meteorological aspects, that for example, when a low-pressure system is near, there is a high possibilities of rain. They are the atmospheric conditions by which one can predict what kind of weather is coming. It's up to us to go out with an umbrella or not. If we consider the weather forecast as a divination system, then meteorologists are witches. Our brain works based on electrical impulses and chemical reactions. Both could be influenced by external elements. For example, if we drink several glasses of liquor, it will be in our bloodstream, it will reach our brain, and it will affect its operation. We can say it is a direct induction method. Now let us consider the situation when we enter a place that we do not know, and just by entering, we feel uncomfortable, annoyed, or we do not like it. What happened? Why do we feel the way we feel? What makes us feel that way? Why there are natural places that we like to go in preference to others. Did you ever ask yourself the question why? The same thing happens with other people. You may meet someone you have not seen before, and you feel comfortable, at ease, or on the contrary, meeting someone that just by saying hello, you reject the person, you don't like him or her. Everything that we are, that we feel, that we think, it is processed in our brain, and it responds to certain stimulus that you may be able to see or know, and to others that you are not aware. That is an aspect to life where astrology has an explanation where science does not. As mentioned in several previous articles, how do you explain that on any given day, for no apparent reason, you wake up and you are at war with the world? Everything bothers you, and after few hours, that feeling goes away by itself. If we look at the natal chart, we will probably see that there was an aspect of the moon that generated that energy, which was represented in a state of mind. In our brain, something that influenced the electrical energy and chemical reactions between neurons that made us feel that way. That would be the fatalistic view that says that we are victims of circumstances. However, on the other hand, there is the most important part that we have as human beings, which is consciousness. Consciousness allows us to rationalize what happens to us, and modify the way we feel. This would be the response of a person with a certain degree of evolution. We could say that our brain is a biological machine, but our consciousness is above it. Consciousness can control and manage the brain. Our natural reaction is what our biological machine does based on our programmed patterns such as DNA, life experience, education and others, but consciousness is there to be developed. Consciousness is initially in its natural state, aligned with the brain operation. Depending on our stage of consciousness evolution, so it will be our life experience. Our natal chart can determine our original state, which could be compared to a rough and natural stone. Now, if through our development we work trying to raise the level of consciousness, that rough stone can become polished and smooth. By working on our personal development, we are going to expand and modify our neural network, leading us to overcome the original natural conditions, which usually are our challenges. Once we overcome our challenges, we will be less vulnerable and affected by outside energies from our environment, regardless where they come from, people, planets and the rest. There is a way up, and there is a way down. In the same way that we can evolve in our consciousness, we can go to our most primitive state, which would be represented by our life be run under domination of our conditioning factors. The brain does not know what is right, or what is wrong, neither knows what it is to evolve. The brain is just a processor. Our consciousness is what drives our life and show what we really are. To raise our consciousness, we must feed our brain everything that serves to keep it active, and at its maximum productive capacity. Nowadays the mind is occupied with news, social media and electronic games. This is the direct way to bring our brain back to its primitive and rudimentary form. We are seeing it daily in the world. Division in societies faced by ideals that lead nowhere, void of substance and with victories and objectives without any added value. From the astrological point of view, it is well noted that the energies active in this period are very challenging, but in no way do they justify what it is happening in the world. What is happening? It is simply indicating the degree of abandonment in which the human evolutionary process is. Science may be at a very high level, but as a human race, we are at one of the lowest points in consciousness development. We will have to hit rock bottom or something extremely serious will have to happen in the world, for humanity to return to the path of consciousness development. Today from what we see, we are out of our way from development. Thank you for being here. You can subscribe to our channel or to our blog at www.thenewroads.com.